Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. I know that you're really going to appreciate our guest today. In fact, many of you write in and you ask us, where do you find all these great guests, these wonderful people that we talk to on the show? Well, the answer is the gentleman who's here today, AJ Rice, a publicist, author. We're going to talk with him today. Welcome to the program, AJ. We wanted to have you on here for a long time. It's great that you're finally here.
LG, it's great to be here. Coming to you live from the swamp here in Washington, D.C. It's really a pleasure. Long time coming. Let's do it, brother. Let's suit up.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get it into your books and everything else you're doing. I have to say though, there's some really famous people have been talking about you and your book, the White Privilege album. One of them is Abraham Lincoln. He says,
Indeed.
"What do you mean Gen Z doesn't know the Republican Party freed the slaves? Are these people dumb AF? They need to read AJ Rice's book." I don't know how you got Lincoln to
Yeah,
comment on your book, but wow, that's a real
tough.
stroke of genius.
That's right. It was tough.
Yeah,
I'm not as close with him as I am with Ben Franklin, who's a Philadelphian like myself,
right.
as the audience cringes at this accent. But but no, Lincoln, gave us a little blurb, and we got one from Joseph Stalin.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
got one
great.
we got one from Santa Claus,
Yes. Yeah,
I
I gotta read the Santa Claus one.
That's right.
This is beautiful. So this is what Santa says. He says, "Jesus and I have been, doing, holidays a long time, and in his thought-provoking new book, A.J. Rice teaches both of us where all the white liberals went."
That's right.
Apparently well, I know where they went to Ottawa to run our government. Apparently,
That's
they n
correct.
now celebrate something called Kwanzaa. Who knew?
Yeah,
So, yeah, no less than Santa Claus you've had.
that's
Incredible.
right. Saint Nicholas of Smyrna was originally a Greek archbishop. He became Santa Claus.
Wow.
Was it the Council of Nicaea? Had to slap a few people around. When I was talking to Santa Claus, I asked him, I said, "Can I get a blurb from Jesus?" He said, Jesus is busy.
Yeah.
You don't have to, and I'm Catholic, and we understand that. So, we 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 understand that Jesus is busy, right? Which is why I've got to talk to priests instead of God directly. It's why when I go to confession instead of God directly, I have to deal with the DMV for heaven, right? The Department of Motor Vehicles for heaven, the TSA for heaven. That's what I'm dealing with as a Catholic. And I've been dealing with it my whole life. So no, Jesus is always too busy, right? So, I know the Protestants, I guess he's not too busy for them, but for the Catholics, we have to deal with all the middlemen.
Well, AJ, I'm glad that you mentioned this thing about the name Publius, because of course he's a very important person in the book of Acts. He gave sanctuary to the apostle Paul. So is there something in a name here? Shakespeare said, "What's in a name?" But was there something in the name, the reason why you chose Publius as the name for your now, I mean, you must be the leading publicist for conservative voices in America. But where did you come up with this name, the Publius?
Well, so there's a couple Publiuses in history. Um, so I got it from a group of gentlemen who got it from ancient Rome.
Right.
So, so the original one, and there was two, and I don't think the one,
Flavius Vegetius Renatus.
right.
That guy? Yeah, okay.
And then and then there was a Roman senator as well that was
Right.
during the time of Cicero and Seneca and others.
Yeah, yeah.
So I got it because I am based in Virginia. And I was surprised that, this company, the name hadn't been used here. So I got it from the three gentlemen who used it as a pen name to write the Federalist Papers.
Oh, right.
So what you had, ladies
Yes.
and gentlemen, is
Okay.
you had John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison,
Mhm.
the Virginian. The other two were from New York.
Yeah.
They basically wrote under this pen name and were placing basically to make the argument for a constitutional government. And
Right.
it was being, placed in newspapers and in pamphlets with pamphleteers. Um,
Mhm.
you know, after the American Revolution, but before, during the time of what was called the Articles of Confederation, and then, to basically make the intellectual argument that we should all join together as one nation under God. And
Yeah.
they all used Publius. Now, they got it from Rome, and I got it from them.
Ah, wonderful. Well, you're in great company, and those three really are titans, aren't they, of American history?
No different. No different.
Yeah, in a real sense,
They didn't
becoming
always
more
agree
relevant.
either. They didn't
What's
always
that?
agree. They did not
Oh,
always agree,
no. No, and
especially
that's
Leighton.
an important thing, isn't it? And becoming less and less common, having civil disagreements about important things. And governments are trying to ban these types of conversations. But talking now about your work as a publicist, you're handling some really big names. For example, Judge Janine Pirro. I love her work. She says, having worked with AJ Rice on many of my own projects, I know him to be astute, no nonsense, and on point. Stop what you're doing right now and pick up a copy of The Woking Dead. That's one of your books we're going to be talking about. Laura Ingraham, huge name in American news, is one of your clients. Pete Hegseth says AJ Rice has been a coal miner in the conservative trenches for patriotic projects for years, including my own. It's about time America found out what is on his mind, talking about your book. So you're connected with all these really huge names in conservative discourse in America. How did this come about? How did you become a publicist?
Well, it didn't happen overnight, for sure. I mean, some of the people, like I've known Pete for 20 years. The fact that he ended up the Secretary of War, was not on our bingo card, 18 years ago or so when we were hanging out. But I was Laura Ingram's executive producer once upon a time.
At Fox News?
No, her radio
No.
producer.
Oh, okay.
Back when she was the most listened to female talk show host in the United States. She had 400 stations.
Wow.
So she was on for 20 years almost. I was her producer from basically 2004 to 2009. And look, I started out as her assistant, and I became the associate producer, and then we went on a search for executive producer. And like Dick Cheney did when he went looking for a vice president, I found myself. Right. So, and I, traveled the world with her. She's like my big sister. Like, she gave me a blurb for the book there, and I go on her Fox News show. So it's
yes, I've seen you there.
Yeah, it's always fun to be interviewed by your old boss, right? I always bust her stones about that. But I worked on Capitol Hill, and then Laura gave me my first media job. And for about a decade, I produced shows. So one of the reasons I have very few rivals in the publicity space is because with me, you're not just getting somebody that did one thing.
Yeah.
You're getting someone that worked on campaigns going back to like 1996 when I couldn't even vote.
Yeah.
All the way through the Bush-Gore recount years, the Bush re-election against John Kerry, September 11th, the Iraq War, Afghanistan. I come to D.C. I helped a congressman win a special election. I was working in D.C. on the Hill, in the House, and then I saw this job opening for Laura. So I went over there. I got this job. I said sayonara to taking all of the taxpayers' money and just buying Starbucks with it, because that's what they're doing most days up there. Believe me, I was up there for about 9 months, crawling out of my skin. So I started working for Ingram, and I was her producer, and then I became the producer of the Monica Crowley show. Now, those two women, who are very different, they're buddies with each other, but these were the two most listened to female, basically, broadcasters, presenters in the United States on talk radio. Right?
Yeah.
There's some self-help people, but these are the two political ones, and they kind of became, my big sisters. Monica is currently, you see her every day if you watch the news.
Yeah.
Okay, Monica is currently the Assistant Secretary of State for Protocol. So when your low IQ Prime Minister from Canada comes,
which one?
Any of them. Well, at least the one that's come here a couple times recently.
Yeah, Carney.
Monica's the blonde that's standing there when the car comes up. She's the one
Okay.
that brings them in and handles the protocol of handing off one leader to Trump, basically.
Okay.
She's the running back.
Wow.
She's the running back. Like,
Wow.
her job is to catch the leader out of the limo and then transport them to the Oval.
Yeah.
That's her job. So that carries an ambassador status. So she's technically an ambassador as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Ingram and her, they're, so, I did both of those shows, and then I was hired at the Washington Times to produce a show for John Solomon, who's, fairly famous. He's fairly famous now here.
Yeah.
It was an investigative news show. Less opinion, more kind of like a conservative version of NPR's Morning Edition, right? Or like a conservative version of 60 Minutes. And then I was brought in. The last full-time production job I had was for Glenn Beck.
Oh, yeah.
Glenn brought me in to launch something called the Blaze Radio Network.
Yes.
Which now
hugely popular.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. It's now the Blaze Podcasting Network.
Right.
And look, there were some famous people. Buck Sexton was one of my guys there. And so this takes you to about 10 years ago. Now, you got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things, when you're a producer of shows, you've got incoming all day long, especially if they're big shows, for people that want to put their guests or their congressman or governor, senator, whoever, on your show. So in the midst of this, I'm pretty much becoming familiar with everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
And, now granted, these were the Bush years, these were the Obama years, so it's a little different than it is now. As the executive producer of these shows, you also sort of become friends with the other hosts. Like, I know Hannity and all, I know these guys. They're friends with Laura, and I met Limbaugh and so on. So, you kind of understand who's producing this show and that show.
Right.
So everything kind of changed for me. Life is about resets and cycles.
Yeah.
When the OG came down the golden escalator, when Trump showed up in 2015, we got a 10-year anniversary now this past summer of golden escalator ride. So I already knew them from booking them on with Laura. They would come on, him and Ivanka and Don Jr. would come on to promote The Apprentice, Trump's TV show, or to or to promote, the beauty pageants, right? That Trump owned. So, he announces, and you got to understand, here in town in D.C., you have basically, you hear all the time this term special interest groups. Now, they are here. There's a lobbyist for, how to shovel snow the right way. You know what I mean? There's lobbyists for everything. But in my space, you have GR firms, which stands for government relations firms.
Right.
In most cases have lobbyists and lawyers in-house. You've got public policy shops, which are kind of hybrids, or think tank mixed with lobbying. And then you've got PR firms. Now, understand this. Remember, Trump was running against 17 or 18 different people.
Yes, he was. I remember. He
systematically scalped them all and nailed their scalps to the wall. And look, some of them are, in the cabinet now, like Rubio.
Or his friends, like Ted Cruz.
Sure. Yeah. So, but we threw in with him immediately.
Yeah.
And most of the town here did not.
Yeah. That was a risky move at the time, wasn't it?
I mean, look, the right-wingers basically were broken down into three groups. Ted Cruz, your sort of traditional conservatives.
Right.
Evangelicals.
Rock-ribbed guys, yeah.
Yeah. Then you had the Rand Paul crowd, which are the libertarian, unbridled free markets and all the rest of it. You had, because, Rand inherited his father's movement.
Right.
So, the Cato Institute and Reason Magazine and all the, so they, the libertarians threw in with Rand, And then you had this wild circus of, just a motley crew of all different types of people that threw in with Trump.
Right.
And then the establishment pretty much was either with Jeb Bush, right? Remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
Low energy Jeb. Remember low energy Jeb?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
They were with Jeb. They were with John Kasich, the governor of Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
who looked like he was like a tweaker. He looked like he was in the back room, sneaking some Second-Alls and some Adderalls and some Tuinals. And then
Where do you come up with this stuff?
And then, I mean, go back and watch some video of Kasich. He was just like,
I will now.
he looked like Timmy from South Park. So then you had, then you had some people that threw in with Rubio, right? And Trump systematically demolished all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we were there from the beginning.
Yeah.
Not many people were there. And I remind everyone who wasn't all the time. So
I love to say I told you so.
Yeah. No.
All right.
Oh, I'm from Philadelphia. We're not only sore losers, we're sore winners.
Yeah.
Okay? There's nothing like a sore winner. I mean,
Yeah.
we won the Super Bowl last year, and all we're doing right now is complaining about everything. But that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
Our soccer team is actually the best in the nation here as well.
Wow.
That's the Philadelphia
Amazing.
Union. So they're pretty good.
Well, you certainly have a great sports tradition. In fact,
Sure.
speaking of sports and Philadelphia, I saw recently, this is just as an aside, Sylvester Stallone was talking about the movie Rocky, and he was saying that it's a Christian movie. And it had never occurred to me, but actually just the light went on. It's like, yeah, it really is.
Well,
But
it's about pain. It's about salvation. It's about character. It's about overcoming loss. It's about, I mean, look, a lot of people don't realize this. Rocky loses at the end of that movie. He doesn't.
He does.
He does not
He
win.
does.
He wins in the second one and the third one and the rest of
Yeah.
them. But,
and he's scourged. He's scourged in that fight.
Oh yeah, I mean, he looks like he was flagell. He was like flagellated. But yeah, no, you're right. No, I mean, he's beaten up. So yeah, and then look, I started acquiring MAGA related figures like Judge Jeanine. Judge Jeanine allowed me to become the publicist for Donald Trump Jr.
She's a brilliant lady.
And then once that happened,
yeah.
All hell broke loose. And I can tell you, one of the interesting things about 2023, which I talk about now and I didn't talk about when it was happening, is that during most of that year, we here at Publicist PR were working for Trump, former President Trump at the time.
Yeah.
In one capacity, actually multiple capacities, including the publishing house that him and Don Jr. own.
Right.
We were working for RFK Jr. Because we were promoting his books through Skyhorse, and we were also promoting his super PAC. Okay?
Yeah.
And we were working for Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
Now, he was the only campaign that was paying us directly. So here you have a situation where I'm basically quietly the general manager of the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Dodgers. Let's for our audience up there, the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Blue Jays. And I didn't talk about it. If you squinted hard enough, you could see that something was going on here. Because we were putting out people that were attacking each other. But, and that happens all the time here. I mean, we'll represent the Capulets and the Montagues. We don't care, we have no shame. We have as long as we agree with, most of what they both said, in fair Verona. But that's the thing is that most of the time, we're at the center of the MAGA cinematic universe here. I like to think of myself as the MAGA Kevin Bacon, where if you're not like 1 degree of separation, 2 degrees of separation, right? So when RFK Jr. endorsed Trump and they were on stage together and there's that big event, that was a huge moment for us because we basically...
Were you part of bringing these different camps together, people like Ramaswamy? Wow.
Yeah,
brilliant.
more Bobby.
Yeah.
More Bobby than Vivek. Because
Mhm.
our job with Vivek was just to sort of he had a bunch of surrogates that were pro-Vivek,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
were booking them all over the place.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so, you know, that's what we were doing for him.
Yeah,
We booked him on some bigger things, but, he was booking himself on I mean, he was everywhere.
yeah,
But
yeah,
so that's why, when you look at the cabinet now, as you alluded to in the beginning,
yeah,
we have been kind of the unofficial Indeed.com for the White House here. Uh, you know, because Hegseth's ours,
yeah,
Tulsi Gabbard's ours, RFK Jr.'s ours, Scott Bessent, which is a really interesting story
yeah.
on why he's ours. We didn't even know he was ours because he silently owned a publishing house that yours truly was the publicist for. I had no idea who I was working
Wow.
for. I could have been working for Saddam
Yeah.
Hussein. I could have been working for Putin. I could have been working for you. I don't know but he had
That's that Kevin Bacon thing again,
exactly.
right?
So look, I've been in this game 20 years, and as you know, here various capacities.
Mhm.
So we collect relationships,
Yeah.
and
One
and
one of
and
the relationship.
sometimes some of our groups of people are attacking other groups of
Yeah,
people. I
yeah,
mean, look, you know, Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson right now they're getting defended by some of our people and getting attacked by some of our people.
yeah, and, the show is it's very, interesting to watch. One of the people that you had a professional relationship with that I really wanted to talk to you about, AJ, is the late Charlie Kirk. You represented him, and of course, he's become, uh, I guess, in his tragic death, a very, very seminal figure in American culture in a very short period of time. You want to talk about him and your work with him, and what it was like to know the late Charlie Kirk?
So his last book before this one that's about to drop here in a couple days, um, was with Winning Team Publishing. Now, Winning Team Publishing is owned by Don Jr., Don Sr. This is that publishing house that puts out those big coffee table books of Trump.
Oh, okay.
Trump's letters and
Hmm. Yeah.
Trump's middle fingers to the left and Trump Christmas cards. It's you know, um,
It's a whole industry, isn't
and
it?
also owned by Sergio Gore, who
Mhm.
was the head of the presidential personnel office, but it was just confirmed to be the U.S. ambassador to India now.
Oh,
And I've known him, 20 years. He
so
was
that's another one of your people
Yeah, it's not just
in
the big
cabinet. Wow.
names. I mean, all the middle management over there are mine too. So,
When are you gonna go into
they've
cabinet,
asked. They've asked.
AJ?
No, they have asked. They asked last time.
Oh, wow.
I don't want to reveal who's asked, but I have been asked. And it's just, you know, uh, the loss of freedom,
Yeah.
and quite frankly, income. Um,
Not to
I
put
got
too
a phone
fine point
call.
on it.
If I got a phone
Yeah.
call, if Trumpzilla called me, okay, and told me that I had to come over there and work, I would do that, right?
Yeah.
But I just know, like, it's TMI. I have too much information.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
let me also say this. And some of them up there, and maybe some of the names I've mentioned here today, have said this to me that I am more valuable to them, not on the government payroll, outside the wall.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because I can do things that a government employee can't do.
Mm.
I can
That would
run,
make sense.
I
Yeah.
can, you know, run through the woods with a pack of matches. I can rain down tomahawk missiles over here, make it look like it's coming
Mhm.
over here, use some Houdini-esque misdirection, make an elephant disappear in the middle of the room. I can do
Mhm.
all of those things that they can't do.
Yeah.
They're being clocked.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can do deals and there's all kinds of things I can do, and give them air cover. And
Mhm.
look, when some of our friends here were being confirmed, we were giving them air cover,
Yeah.
because I can wave my magic wand and make, all kinds of things
Yeah.
appear in the media. So
Yeah.
that's what we do here, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of razzle
Mhm.
dazzle. And, it's like Aristotle's rules for
Yeah.
drama, right?
Yeah.
The
That
last
value
the
of being
last word
outside of it is, that was also true of Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk too, wasn't it?
Sure, so let's get back to Charlie. So
Mm,
Charlie's last book was with this group of was with Don and Sergio. So
yeah.
we were their publicists. So, with me and now I've met Charlie, I've known him, been around since he was 18. He used to come and try to get on our shows, and we book him, and I was in private functions and fundraisers and things with Ingram and all the rest. Um, you know, we promoted the books. I interacted with him in a professional manner through that.
Mhm.
Um, I did not like go out and hang out with him, and look, I'm Irish Catholic, so I'm ready to knock one off. Charlie's not a drinker.
Right.
Let me tell you something. In my time doing this, um, and one could say even in my life, okay, so let's say 4 decades, um, there's only been 3 people in the conservative media landscape in the United States that were not only irreplaceable and one of a kind, but reset the board, and you're never going to get another one.
Right.
The first one, and I'm talking people that were not elected to anything.
Right.
We're not
Mhm.
talking about
Mhm.
politicians here like Reagan and Newt
Yeah.
Gingrich and
Yeah.
Trump,
Right.
but Rush Limbaugh, irreplaceable.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Springsteen once gave a speech on Elvis at South by Southwest, and he said Elvis is the last musician that we all agreed on.
Mm.
Everything after Elvis has been a fight.
Yeah.
It's been a fight between the Beatles and the Stones. It's been a fight
Yeah.
between the Beatles and the Beach Boys. It's been a fight between the Beatles and Creedence Clearwater Revival. It's been right.
Michael Jackson and Prince. Yeah, yeah, go
Well,
on and
right,
on.
and that's the
Yeah.
answer, right? So, so,
Yeah.
so Rush is sort of the last figure we all agreed on.
Mhm.
Very few anti-Rush people.
Yeah.
He was friends with Trump, and he was friends with Bush and Cheney.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, the second one, who actually was a mentor to me, is Andrew Breitbart,
Oh, of course. Yes.
and
Yeah.
he drugged the conservative movement into the modern world,
Mhm.
kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the Jonathan Swift of,
Mhm.
conservative technology, conservative
Mhm.
sort of guerrilla journalism. He was the founder of
Mm.
the Drudge Report. He was the founder
Yeah.
of the Huffington Post, and then eventually he created Breitbart.com, where he was a
Yeah.
major talent scout.
Yeah, we brought in people like Ben Shapiro,
Ben
and so in a
Shapiro,
way, he had a hand
and
in the Daily Wire, right?
here's a
Yeah.
classic example. He not only brought in
Mhm.
Ben Shapiro, he brought in Steve Bannon,
Right,
and
yeah.
Bannon and Shapiro don't get along.
No.
So this is what I'm talking about. So,
Yeah, yeah,
he was a talent scout, and then the third one is Charlie.
yeah,
Third one is Charlie. You're not gonna get another one. Don't go look, stop looking for who the next one is.
yeah,
Try to keep it together. Do your best to hold it together. Um, because you're not gonna get another Charlie Kirk. You
yeah.
are going to get something else,
Mhm,
but that
mhm.
something else has yet to reveal itself.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. One of the things that Charlie Kirk spoke a lot about and against is wokeness, and this was a subject of one of your books. I want to talk about, the Woking Dead, you called it,
Sure.
and have a quotation here. It says, "The anti-liberal cult of wokeness has attempted to cancel the Western tradition, but it will not long survive. It offers a creed of sin without absolution, of guilt without soul-easing joys, of frowns without laughter. It rejects the West's high culture and offers nothing in its place. Without learning, art, industry, or anything that might attract a person, its emptiness will soon be seen by all, and liberalism will continue to inspire the civic virtues of our culture." That's kind of does that capture kind of the essence of The Walking Dead, where you talk about why wokeness is so bad, but also why it contains the seeds of its own destruction? What do you think about that?
It does. Um, and The Walking Dead is volume one of a series. The
Right.
White Privilege album is volume two, I mean, look,
Yeah.
we are in a target-rich environment here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
whether you're talking about the social justice warriors in the streets, cancel culture, wokeness, whether you're talking about the trans mafia and the trans movement, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, um, large sections of the media, Hollywood, academia, and up until recently, the tech world. They seem to have, they might be just moving their chips around on who the winner is.
Yeah.
But the tech world, some of them, I think, realize that this is totalitarianism,
Mhm.
that they're eventually gonna come for them.
Yeah.
And, Musk figured it out first, and he, the first guy through the door, they say in comedy in particular, the first guy through the door takes all the bullets, right? So, whether it's, Aristophanes in ancient Greece or Lenny Bruce in the 1950s and 60s here in the United States,
Mhm.
Musk
Mhm.
Musk took them. Musk took a
Yeah.
lot of incoming.
Yeah.
And look, these guys are, they're the kind of nerdy guys, they're not apex predators by any means. They're tech bros.
Right.
And I think a lot of them were probably jealous of Musk's relationship with Trump and the access he had. So I don't care how they got there. They jumped off of the ship of fools, and whether it's Zuckerberg or Altman or any of them, they all sort of followed.
Gates now? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
because Big Daddy will come for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and look, you have to understand some things. And The Walking Dead is about what you said, and look, wokeness is at its core cultural Marxism. And
Yes.
although terms like politically incorrect and terms like wokeness and
Mhm.
triggered and so on, these things are part of our modern parlance.
Mhm. Mhm.
The actual infancy of where all this stuff comes from, you have to go back 100 years.
Right.
Because cultural Marxism was basically concocted by this Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci,
Right. Yeah.
who basically deduced that in places that have a strong middle class, in places that have nuclear families, in places where Greco-Roman Judeo-Christian civilization is thriving, the only way we're going to capture the populace is not going to be through some, revolt or overthrowing of, the Romanovs like the Bolsheviks did. They're
Right.
not
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
and you're not also not necessarily gonna be able to, what's the line? Hang the capitalists with the rope they manufacture, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so they needed to get us another way.
Mhm.
So you're talking 1900, 1910, 1920s. Margaret Sanger, Woodrow Wilson. You're talking early radio, Broadway, the silent
Mhm.
picture industry, the newspaper business, the public sector unions, right?
Yeah.
Education system, the Democrat Party. They start to get in there because it dawned on them that the only way that they're going to turn us into little Marxists is if they get us culturally.
Right.
Because the economic argument in a place with a strong middle class isn't going to work. It's not going to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how they started the long march through the institution,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we're dealing with you know, the stepchildren of that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's who wokeism is.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I mean, look, there's no unified theory of wokeness, although I've attempted it. But the reality is that you know these are like Crayola crayons in like the Crayola 64 box. There's a lot of, and now there's some primary colors
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
identity politics and sort of the gender movement and the race stuff.
Yeah.
So there are some primary colors that we're fighting against, but that is that's sort of the DNA of this cultural
Right.
Marxism,
Mhm.
to get into the institutions and to metastasize like a cancer or
Mhm.
burrow in like tapeworms or termites and slowly eat the body from the inside out rather than the outside in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an intellectual movement, isn't it? Thomas Sowell put this very well. One of the things that's frustrating about the people who are sort of the high priests of wokeness is they're so convinced that they're doing good. He says, much of what are called social problems consists of the fact that intellectuals have theories that do not fit the real world, like Marxism. And from this, they conclude that it is the real world which is wrong
That's right.
and that needs changing. That's kind of cuts at the core of it, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And look, you have to understand that one of the things that, in order for the left to pull this off,
Right.
they need to control the levers of shame, the levers of satire, the levers of farce, of parody, of comedy in and of itself.
Hmm.
Because those things, doesn't matter who you're talking about, you could be talking about Moliere or you could be talking about Joan Rivers, though George Carlin, you pick somebody,
Right. Hmm.
they're sort of the first recorders of history, and quite frankly, they're the guards of liberty on the ramparts because,
Hmm. Hmm.
but if you can convince a large group of them to only mock one group and thereby defend, like we just had for 4 years here in the United States, an upright cadaver, a reanimated corpse, a man
Sleepy Joe.
a man who goes around sniffing children's hair, who's plugged into the wall, the extension cord, right? Every
Yeah.
15 days, you hear a beep from the heart monitor. That's who, and they couldn't, Kimmel, these, Saturday Night Live, all the rest of them,
Yeah.
they apparently for 4 years couldn't see anything funny there.
Right. What a loss to comedy that was.
And look, but
Yeah.
it's fine. But what happened here in 2024? What happened was this. There was a woke Waterloo moment with the last election. Conservatives won the culture war for the first time in a generation. And it wasn't just because the Democrats, as Bill Maher says, as John Fetterman says, as Stephen A. Smith says, three men that are not conservatives, they overplayed their hand, on a lot of things. So what you had was the biggest podcasts in the world, who generally are not, sitting around reading Thomas Sowell.
No.
They are mostly ex-comedians or UFC people or whatever.
He's been kind of a lib, hasn't he, by and large?
Joe Rogan voted for Bernie Sanders.
Wow.
So he endorsed Bernie Sanders, and then he endorsed Trump. So, because here's what happened. The encroachment against the language, what you can't joke about, what you can joke about, right? Who's allowed to be your target, who isn't? You can only punch downward, not upward, or upward, not downward, or all the other nonsense all the rules that the Privy Council comes up with, right? That Torquemada, running the Inquisition of comedy, comes up with, right? It was like the Nuremberg trials of comedy,
right?
And it broke. The dam broke. And Rogan and Andrew Schultz and Theo Vaughn and the Nelk Boys and Barstool Sports and Shane Gillis and all the rest of them snapped. And they snapped and they said, enough's enough. Guys like Maher saw it. He's smart. He went and had dinner with Trump, but he's not, letting Trump off the hook. He's still doing his thing. Certain people that are intellectually honest saw it.
Yeah.
Not only did you see the biggest podcast in the world move to the right, you saw the richest man in the world, who was mostly a Democrat.
Yes. Yeah.
Bring all the tech bros with him and move to the right. He bought Twitter and moved to the right. Twitter was the biggest digital jailbreak in history when he bought it.
Yeah.
Everyone's accounts came back to life. It was like Thanos' snap. Right? It was like the end of Endgame.
Yeah.
On your left situation, right? When Captain America hears that in his ear. That's the reality. And then, of course, you have the oldest male heir of the most famous Democrat family in the United States in the last 100 years, RFK Jr.,
Yeah.
basically say, "I've had it."
Mhm.
And he moves, and
Yeah.
Tulsi moves.
Mhm.
You know, very famous feminist intellectuals like Naomi Wolf
Right.
move.
Mhm. Yes.
Because it was a combination of wokeness and cancel culture, yes. But it was also the Me Too movement. It was also Occupy Wall Street and Antifa. It was also this Black Lives Matter grift
Yeah.
and COVID.
Yeah.
COVID broke a lot of people.
Mhm.
COVID had a lot of people move in our direction.
Yeah.
People like Woody Harrelson, for God's sakes.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm. Yeah.
People like David Mamet,
Yeah.
right? The great playwright who wrote, Glenn Ross and
Yes.
American
Mhm.
Buffalo and, all the rest of it. So
Mhm.
they got their asses kicked because in the midst of all that, they have on one hand a reanimated corpse, and on the other hand, the second most unlikable woman in history after Hillary, Kamala Harris, who in 107 days lit $1.3 billion on fire.
Oh, unbelievable. She might run again. But, this
Good.
explains, AJ, why you write your books in the way that you write them. Because you approach these topics, serious topics, but you approach them from a point of view of comedy and satire.
Correct.
And this is a refreshing thing. These are not, yes, it's not that your books are anti-intellectual. They attack intellectualism.
Right.
And you attack certain intellectual concepts, but you do it through humor and satire. And that's kind of the refreshing, that's part of the approach, not only in your first book, but also in the White Privilege album, where you're talking about a very, let's say, a progression of wokeism. And again, I'm going to quote Thomas Sowell here just to set up talking about your second book. He says, more whites were brought as slaves to North America than blacks brought as slaves to the U.S. or to the 13 colonies from which it was formed. White slaves were still being bought and sold in the Ottoman Empire decades after blacks were freed in the United States. But nobody talks about this. Nobody really wants to talk about the truth about slavery, because everybody wants to talk about this concept of white privilege. So, what is white privilege, AJ, and why did you feel it was important to write your second book about it?
Well, yeah, they want to talk about who the last slave was and not who the first one was, or
Right.
anyone in between, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm Irish Catholic. The term redneck uh, is derivative of Irish people brought to the Caribbean as indentured servants
Yeah.
to basically toil in sun that if you met any Irish person and you're looking at me, I'm part German, so that gives me a little bit of a tan. Um, you know, uh, it's not exactly the greatest place in the world to drop a bunch of people from Cork, okay, or from right, or from Derry,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
from Ballymena, or from
Mhm.
Galway.
Yeah.
So yeah, their necks would get red, hence the term redneck.
Mhm.
And look, the
Mhm.
word slave comes from the word Slav.
Right. Mhm.
And look, there's slavery going on right now.
Yeah.
In Africa, sub-Saharan Africa.
Mhm.
You have you have the Janjaweed in the Sudan enslaving blacks. These are basically Arabs from the north coming down.
Mhm.
Um, and let's be honest, if you follow the bouncing ball on African American slavery, you have a situation where you had Tribe A, black, in Africa, enslaving Tribe B.
Yes.
And they showed how to do
Yeah.
this. They showed how to
Yeah.
do this first to the Spanish and the Portuguese. And the
Mhm.
Spanish and the Portuguese showed the French, the English, and the Dutch. And the French, the English, and the Dutch showed us how to
Yeah.
do it. So,
Mhm.
this is there's sin to go around, right? You get
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
equal distribution of sin here, right? No one's
Mhm.
absolved of anything, but they want to rewrite history and claim that this was some situation where, you know, this was some new invention, slavery, in the 17th century, in the
Yeah.
16th century. I hate to break it to you, it's not, and it's still going on right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, white privilege. Look, I'm a tongue-in-cheek type of guy. I believe
Do
that
tell.
without white privilege, I'm a wise ass. Without white privilege, you don't have the nuclear family. You don't have Western civilization. You don't
Right.
have, the middle class.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
thank all of them for that. And I mean, look, Black Lives Matter put it on their website that the nuclear family was a construct. I love that word. It's a
Yeah.
construct of white supremacy and white privilege. That
Yeah.
there was no such thing. But au contraire, um, because if you read Booker T. Washington, if you read Frederick Douglass or Thomas Sowell, the modern incarnation of those two men, what you'll find is the out-of-wedlock childbirth rate in 1910 in the African American community was around 8 or 9%, whereas today, 100 plus years later, it's at 75.
Yeah. What a travesty.
So,
Yeah.
so what happened?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing to your people?
Yeah.
What have you done culturally? What
Yeah.
has the government done? Come in, replace the father, reward bad behavior, reward out of wedlock childbirth. And look, I'm not an uptight guy, right? I'm not,
I think
I'm
we
not
can
that guy.
see that,
I'm not that guy. You want to live
AJ.
with your wife before you marry her? I don't care, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not following you home. You do whatever you want to do in your house, okay?
Right.
Stay out of my house. Stay out of my wallet, my house. Stay out of my refrigerator, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
reality is that, something happened,
Mm-hmm.
and smarter men than me have pointed to, the New Deal programs and the Great Society programs of FDR and Lyndon Johnson and, even you could even argue Obamacare.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, but that's what happened. So with white privilege, you know, I, I am trying to show people that throughout history, the left likes to talk about the arc of progress bending towards justice.
Right. That's
Well,
Martin Luther King Jr. Right.
well,
Mm-hmm.
if you actually study that arc of progress, who put Jackie Robinson in the game, right?
True. Yeah.
A white guy.
Yeah.
Who put all the black people that have ever been on the Supreme Court? 3 white people.
Yeah.
Barack Obama had 3 chances
Yeah.
to put a brother on the court.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He didn't. He put Kagan, an unmarried, miserable white woman. He put Sotomayor, the wise
Yeah.
Latina, another
Mm-hmm.
unmarried, miserable woman,
Mm-hmm.
but the first Hispanic, because we got to look,
Yeah.
it's like a sushi menu. We got to check these things, you know. And then, obviously when Scalia died, he had a chance to pick someone else, and he ended
Mm-hmm.
up picking Merrick Garland, who never got
Yeah.
a white male who never got
Thank goodness.
who never
Thank
got
goodness.
confirmed. Yeah, he never got confirmed,
Yeah.
but he ended up being Biden's attorney general as
Yeah.
a consolation prize. So
Yeah. Yeah.
look, white people from Western civilization have risked blood, treasure, reputation, their lives, how they're remembered, their
Mm-hmm.
reputations, to help bend this little arc of progress that they're talking about.
Right.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at Donald Trump, Trump sent his private plane to go get Nelson Mandela
Yeah.
and fly him to the United States because he couldn't get a flight here.
Mm-hmm.
He sent his plane to go get him.
Yeah.
Look, these are anecdotes, but they all tell a larger story.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that, the left tries to reinvent the United States with the 1619 Project and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, no one is devoid of sin, and, imperfect governments are filled with imperfect people.
Right.
You're a Christian and you believe there was only ever one perfect person,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
even he had to slap someone around from time to time.
He did. Yeah.
And, so that's the thing, is that this idea of white privilege is really just code for
Mhm.
an attack on the most successful civilization in Earth's history.
Mhm.
And not all civilizations are created equal, as you know, which is why some of them go away.
Yeah. But that's part of what wokeness attacks is
That's right.
the idea to discern between what are good and bad ideas, good and bad societies.
Sure.
Folks,
What culture works and what doesn't?
yeah.
Why does one culture produce Shakespeare and Mozart
Mhm.
and another culture produces
Those are evil white guys now, AJ. You can't talk about them. You can talk about them here.
right. And another culture produces people that hijack 747s and slam them into buildings. So,
Right.
right? I mean, okay. So look, I mean, there's all this talk about how, we are a multicultural country here in the United States. We are not. We are a
Multi
ethnic.
multi-ethnic. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We have
So
one
what's that
culture here.
difference?
We have
What's
one
that
culture.
difference for you, AJ, between multicultural and multi-ethnic? This is
The
an
fact is
important
this,
distinction.
that you can come here and you can join us in this great melting pot, but we're not gonna become Yugoslavia and balkanize ourselves, right? And you can
Right.
come
Mhm.
here and we can go out on St. Patrick's Day and have a Guinness, and we can go out on Cinco de Mayo and have a shot of tequila. You can go do yoga and find your third eye and go eat sushi. Go eat sushi and tikka masala and whatever the hell else you want. But
Mhm.
just because we do that does not mean we are throwing the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence and the scientific method and Hamlet into a wood chipper for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not doing it.
Mhm. 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 Just because, you don't have a Shakespeare or you don't have a Mozart, in your culture. But folks, we've been talking with, AJ Rice, who is the author of, 2 books now, The Woking Dead and The White Privilege Album. There's a third one coming that I'm gonna ask him about. But these books, tackle serious subjects, but from a comedic point of view. And AJ, I want to ask you about this. So, from your point of view, obviously, we can tell just from sitting down with you. You're a funny guy. You approach things in a kind of sardonic, sarcastic way sometimes, but you approach these books in a deliberate way from the point of view of comedy and that comedy in the way that you write it is a form of persuasion. Why was it that you chose comedy as sort of the voice of your books? Because I think that was a kind of an important decision, wasn't it, for you?
It was. And let me just state right off the bat that I would never want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. Okay? Look, I have a literature background before politics. I studied film as well. I study stand-ups and I study the history of humor and satire and farce because no matter how many bullets you have or how big your army is, going all the way back to the Peloponnesian Wars, where Aristophanes is putting on plays about real people that are deciding whether Athens and Sparta should continue killing each other. And he's
Mhm.
mocking the hell out of them to their faces.
Mhm.
And you'd think he'd, get his head chopped off, but he didn't. And he started to persuade the populace that maybe this is stupid.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're both Greek. This is dumb. There is another
Yeah.
enemy. There's another enemy over there that we should be fighting. it's called
Yeah.
it's called Persia.
Yeah.
It's called Persia,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But you know, if you study the history of comedy and satire, what you'll find is that there was always some intransigent power that was trying to control thought, control language, control what you laugh at. So
Mhm.
whether it was Nero and Caligula, who were trying to basically arrest and murder playwrights and philosophers in Rome,
Mhm.
and Domitian was probably the worst one.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
whether it's the Puritans during Shakespeare's era,
Mhm.
whether it's the Inquisition looking into Cervantes' Don Quixote,
Right.
or
Mhm.
whether it's the Supreme Court, you know, having to weigh in on George Carlin's 7 dirty words. And
Yeah.
I won't say them all here, although I do love them. I use them frequently.
Mhm.
The audience can go look up which ones are missing and why there should have been 8 or 9 maybe. But
Mhm. Mhm.
but you know, I believe that comedy reveals truth.
Mhm.
Comedy is the elixir of
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
I believe that when the comedians are scared, true totalitarianism has arrived.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by the weaponization of humor to keep everyone honest.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
there's always been a power trying to tamp down this stuff. And it
Yeah.
really wasn't until the 20th century that that power moved to a secular, humanist, um, genderless, weird, polyglot group of, totalitarians that sort of, I guess, are picking up where Mao and Stalin and Castro and Ho Chi Minh and
Mhm.
Maduro, where they sort of, you know, they're kind of getting it from them. Now,
Right.
Mussolini and Hitler and Franco, I mean, they were all guilty.
Yeah.
Some of them were not of the left, some were of the right, like Franco and
Yeah.
Salazar and Portugal and so on. But, you know, for most of history, it was either kings, Caesar, the Catholic Church. Even then, Calvinism and the Protestant church has got, it's like Puritans, and well, we can outdo the Catholics, So, but throughout history, there's always been this force tamping down things, trying to stop humor from happening. Uh,
Yes.
right, and so
Yeah.
some people are fascinated by science and scientists that were attacked, or
Mhm.
artists that painted or were attacked, and because they all claim that we're all morally corrupting the populace,
Right.
so that they need to act upon us to save the poor plebes out here in the world from
Mhm.
Richard Pryor's jokes or Dave Chappelle's jokes,
Yeah.
or, Shane Gillis's jokes, or whoever, right?
Yes.
That's the argument that's been made going back to Greece all the way through, the
Mhm.
Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment. They all took it on the chin, everybody. Mark Twain took it. Everyone took it. Charlie Chaplin took it. Everyone. Howard Stern, before he lost his mind, they all took it. There was
Yeah.
always some group. You
Mhm.
could call it, in one era, it was the Inquisition. In another era, it's the FCC,
Right.
the Federal Communications Commission here in the United States.
Mhm.
The group
Mhm.
of unelected, wise men. Queen Elizabeth I had the Privy Council. In fact, the person that reported the untoward fiction and theater, there was actually a man during Shakespeare's time called the Master of Revels. And his job was to police revelry.
Ah, of course.
And if you were guilty of putting on the wrong play or writing the wrong sonnet or whatever the hell it is, he would report
Mhm.
you to the Privy Council,
Right.
and then they would come get you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
Ben Johnson spent two two stints in jail for for plays
Yeah.
for plays that criticized the
Mhm.
church or the monarchy or whatever the hell it is.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I mean, this is real. This isn't just, Joan Rivers calling Michelle Obama a tranny and people going
Mhm.
after her
Yeah.
10 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
this is throughout all of history. And look, the West policed humor, uh, just like everyone else did. However, we also had more of it. And in the end,
mhm.
one could say, unlike every other civilization or culture, comedy survived.
Yes.
Man, have you ever seen there was a movie, Albert Brooks made a movie called Searching for Comedy in the Muslim World.
I've never seen this. I is it a
Evidently,
documentary?
it's funny. It was
Yeah.
done I think he did it to either the late '90s, 2000 no, it was after 9/11.
Yeah.
So it was after 9
Yeah.
so, and he's, like, wandering around. It's kind of like a docudrama type
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
And, he at the end, spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, he doesn't find it,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah. There are no court jesters.
No, they
They're
get,
they're
stoned to death. No, no, no,
yeah.
it's not gonna happen, right?
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So those are
Well, so we've kept you here for about an hour. We've talked about your 2 books, The Woking Dead and The White Privilege album. Those are being added to our reading list, but we haven't had a chance to talk about the 3rd book in the trilogy. Is that one in the hopper? I know you've been very busy these days, there with your agency. You're one of the top publicity agencies in the world running that. That obviously keeps you very busy. Have you found any time to work on your 3rd book?
It's done. It's actually
Oh, great.
up on Amazon right now for presale.
Oh, fantastic.
It went up last week. Um,
Okay.
you can get it. It comes out, this summer. And it's called The Curse of the Bearded Lady. Uh,
Oh, wow.
and the cover, I don't know whether you can pull the cover up here, but, you could show it later, but
Oh,
the
AJ,
cover the
God
co
bless you, man.
I'm gonna need witness protection for the cover art. I mean,
I'm gonna guess it has something to do with LGBTQ.
yes, the subtitle is How the Trans Mafia Whacked American Sanity. And
That is wonderful.
those who aren't up to speed on Italian Catholic parlance here in the United States, getting whacked by Tony Soprano or
Oh, yeah.
Michael Corleone is basically
Mhm.
you sleeping with the fishes. So,
Right.
you get a pair of cement shoes and you get dropped in Lake Ontario, right?
Well, we can be sure that that one is going to be very, very funny. And again, I'm sure another brilliant comedic treatment of a very serious subject. So, where else can people find you if they want to follow you and you're writing? Are you on Substack? You got your own website? If people want to
Sure.
look up and find out more about you and follow what you do, where do they find you, AJ?
Yeah, so PubliusPR.com, the Publius National Post on Substack, and really on all social media. I'm either under AJ Rice or Publius PR or both.
Yeah.
Some of these places there's 2 of them, me and the
Yeah.
company. But yeah, look, I mean, look, Christmas is coming. We all have to chip in to help pay for that Jeff Bezos wedding that happened this year. We just released the White Privilege album in paperback. So if
Wonderful.
if the mood should strike you, ladies and gentlemen, there in the great white north, you could, have yourself a White Privilege album Christmas. Get a couple copies of each of these. There's hardback and paperback of both. There's electronic of both. There's audio of both. So however you want to deliver some mayhem this holiday season, you got a couple, 300-pound blue-haired nieces and nephews coming home from university, and you want to try to educate them, give them a laugh, buy a couple copies of the book.
Brilliant. Well, AJ, we want to thank you so much for this hour of revelry that you've given us.
That's right.
I hope people will buy your books in Canada before they're banned and burned by our government.
That's
I
right.
know you know all about that,
Sure.
but I want to thank you so much, sir, for taking the time out from your very busy schedule and all that you're doing to spend some time with our viewers and listeners here on Gray Matter. It's been a real privilege. A white privilege getting to know you a bit better and talking about your books and everything that you're doing. So thanks very much for being here and God bless you and your work.
Thank you, sir. Look, you're a patriot. You're a big thinker. Everyone should buy your book as well. We
Yeah.
appreciate everything you do fighting for liberty up there in Canada, our dear friend.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, AJ. And thanks again for being our guest here today.
Thank you, sir. Merry
Okay.
Christmas.
You too.